You're listening to an episode recorded during the time Innovation Fuel was part of University Canada West. We are proud and grateful for the work we've done together, and we want to thank the university for being in our podcast. We are now excited to continue the journey of Innovation Fuel into its next chapter. Thanks for listening. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Innovation Fuel, the podcast that brings you fantastic stories from entrepreneurs and key industry professionals. I am Dave Kiran.
And I am Gelareh Farhadian. We are educators, entrepreneurs, and your hosts. Innovation Fuel is our weekly business podcast brought to you by University Canada West. Each week, we explore diverse business models, entrepreneur journeys, experts' insight, and managerial challenges, and how companies stay agile and innovative during COVID-19. Check out our episodes at www.ucanwest.ca/innovationfuel. Hi, Dave.
How are you doing, Gelareh? Again, very excited to get back into what we haven't. Seems like we haven't been away for a while.
Yeah, I think that yes. It means I haven't seen you from 1 hour. So
1 hour ago.
Okay, buddy. You know what I really miss?
Yeah.
I really miss go to the kind of Caribbean countries, Maldives. You know, I had my honeymoon on Maldives. Be there. Why am not there and working from there? Because we are working from home mostly now.
Yeah, like even just working from home, not even being able to go down to the campus and being able to, interact with people. Like this whole world of what we consider, and the word I've heard being thrown around is the nomad element. So, what is this world of nomad? Are we ever going to get out of this? Are we going to find a way?
Why do you have to live in Vancouver and pay this much?
Oh, yeah.
Costs, it's so expensive to live in Vancouver. Why we are here when we can go to Mexico and live there? Why not?
Well, I'm happy. Let's take the show on the road. Let's go to Mexico. Let's go to the Caribbean. I love the sunshine, so I'm happy to go wherever you want me to go. Yeah, out of Vancouver for sure. Like, your cost of living is really expensive. Let's go.
But how about our job?
Ooh. Oh, geez, yeah. Do you don't think the boss will let us to go?
No, I don't think so.
No.
No,
you sure?
You should ask her. Let's go and ask her.
Let's go ask the boss.
The question here is, so why some company and some organizations let their employees go and stay in any places they want? And why not some of them do it? And what is the challenges for people who are going and send their employees overseas, and as it means they can go anywhere they want and work from there?
Yeah, and you think about the work-life balance life and the element that they might be able to give back to their employees by having that balance of work-life balance. And I think one of the biggest things that comes up in this sort of story is women. Because women, we have this challenge as women are have other things. They have more things at home, and maybe having this balance of working from home might make it more easier for them to be able to take on bigger roles and bigger opportunities.
So let's talk to our guest today, Carrie Goetz. Maybe she has some answer for us.
Carrie, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
So, Carrie, we're always curious to know where our guests come from, and our audience is always curious to know, and especially our students who listen to our podcast. But, Carrie, can you tell us a little bit about you and where you come from and who you are?
Yeah, so I'm kind of boring. I'm just a Midwestern girl. I was raised in Michigan and Illinois and those parts, and I live in Mississippi now. I moved here almost 40 years ago now, and I am one of these people that's been in IT forever, since IT pretty much started. Yeah, my first computer I worked on is in the Smithsonian. Not the exact computer, but certainly, the exact model. But I've been in this industry for about 40 years in some shape, form, or fashion.
Yeah, I can remember some of those. I sometimes tell my students that, I work in a computer that was DOS version, and we didn't have Windows, no graphic, and we had to chat, find the people through that one as well. It's sometimes they cannot even imagine that we dialed someone. Due to be dialed to be.
still break out of the command line interface sometimes, though. I mean, old habits die hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got even especially the kids. The kids, they don't know anything else. But my kids, they touchscreen. What do you mean? You have to type? Do you have to type something? Yeah, I learned how to type on a typewriter. What's a typewriter?
Yeah, it's funny. My grandkids, my oldest granddaughter was really good with a mouse and a computer when she was young. And then her little sister grew up just 4 years later and couldn't figure out how to use a mouse or what to do with the mouse. And my stepdaughter said, I just don't understand. Kieran was so good with a mouse. And I'm like, she didn't have touchscreens. So, there was just in 4 short years, the whole interface completely flipped.
I know. So, Carrie, could you explain a little bit about your job right now and what your company is?
So my company is StrategITcom. We are really sort of an encompassing, we have a solution side of the business and a services side of the business. And the name, although it's spelled funny, comes from strategy, IT, and communications. And so that's really where we circle around. We have a telecommunications solution side, and then we also have a services side, which is predominantly data center consulting, strategic consulting, helping people figure out, like smart city initiatives is one of our initiatives right now. We're working with different cities to, on planning and the different projects they can bring to the table to enhance the life of their citizens, and working with edge data centers and data centers that are going to sit out there at the edge and support some of those initiatives. So it's a lot of fun. It changes all the time.
How has your environment changed with the now change in COVID and your employees, and how you're reaching your employees and how you access those employees and gaining them in the market?
Well, it's probably more different on the customer side than anybody that works with us, just because, now you're doing everything online and you're convincing people of your services online, and you get Zoom fatigue, just like a lot of folks do. And people get tired of staring at cameras and being on computers all day. And, I think that's one sort of the downside. And, another thing that's really different, we were talking this morning about all of these companies, are they really going to expect people to put in the same hours when they go back to the offices that they've been putting in at home? Because, a lot of people have an hour and a half, 2 hour commute, especially if the weather's bad. And they're not doing that now, right? They're working those hours instead of sitting in a car those hours. And so are they really going to expect this kind of, like, when people do go back, what is that going to look like? I hate the phrase the new normal. I think this is the new horribleness. But, when we get back to some semblance of normalcy, then, I do think there's going to be some changes there.
Yeah, it's me and Dave, for example, today. We had a meeting at 6:30 a.m. So if we back to work on office, we cannot have that meeting, because maybe I'm he's commuting, going to his campus. So it's not work that way anymore. We cannot be that much productive. I think about myself and Dave, and so we are much more productive. But if you're going back to the campus or office, we have to spend some time on transit, and then coffee and lunchtime. I do everything right now on my desk. So, but how about, did you have more access to more talents these days than before, or no, didn't change?
Well, I think that's one thing that's definitely going to change, especially for women in the industry. The attrition rate for women in tech is 67%, which is horrible, absolutely horrible.
Totally. Yeah.
According to the last study that I read, and with COVID, more women are losing their jobs than men, which is also horrible. But, the access to a bunch of other people, like there's so many companies now that swore they would never allow a remote workforce. And now they have to allow a remote workforce. So I think there's going to be some blend in between. And I think work from everywhere is going to become a huge job perk, so that, you don't necessarily have to be sitting in a corporate office and you can still be productive. And I think there's still going to be some companies that are going to require that. And there's some jobs certainly that are going to require that, factory jobs and those kind of things, that really data center jobs that require that physical on-site presence. But I think this is a great equalizer for a lot of women that, over the years, tech has done a really bad job of using tech to solve tech problems, right? So when women need to take off and be with a sick kid, a lot of times they'd lose their job, especially if it was a child that had a lot of illness, right? And now she could actually stay working. She could work from home. She can work, it doesn't have to be 8 to 5. She can work the hours that she wants to work with. And I think it's going to be a much more forgiving work community coming out of this.
And do you think those employers are going to be flexible around that timing too? Like, I said, and we talk about the openness of being able to work from home, but then being able to make your own hours, because we typically work a 9 to 5 or an 8 to 5, or it's always that element. Do you think there's opportunity for flexibility?
Well, I think that's the whole thing, right? If we're trying to attract employees in 2021, it's a very, very different equation than trying to attract employees in 2019. And so, it's a different set of perks. Like Silicon Valley had certain perks. There's paternity leave is one that we don't really have much of here in the U.S., like we do maternity leave, things like that. And now I think since we have the ability to work remote and we have that, I think people are just viewed more humanly too. I think because of COVID, if a kid comes running in the room a year and a half ago, we'd be mortified. Now it's like, oh, hi, honey, how are you? So I do think there's going to be some changes. I really do. I think that there's going to be some additional humanity that comes out of this, and I think the perks at work are going to be a big part of that. And I think being able to tailor your work environment is going to be huge. And then if you take into consideration people that have certain disabilities, we've now just opened up a lot of work to them. People that, there's people that have autism, for instance, or somewhere on the spectrum that can't work where there's noise. Well, they can now go work at home, be quiet, be very, very productive, and do exactly what they need to do. So I think being able to really treat people like people and create a work environment around that is going to be important. And HR is just really going to have to get out of the dark ages and step up to the plate and realize that. And as companies, especially in tech, try to attract more women and try to bring diversity and inclusion, these are all things that I think are great equalizers and great levelers to help bring some of those people to the equation.
Yeah, it's a very good things that you started, but about the HR. And so let's talk about you. I mean, how you find talents, even if it's not in the United States, even not stayed in your city. So how you find them, how you attract them?
Well, talent is very difficult. We do a lot of work with partner companies, so we didn't have to add headcount, which makes it very good for us and for the partner companies. So our equation is a little bit different, although it is in the company charter that 50% of our employees will be female and 50% of all our partner referral companies will go to diversely owned or veteran-owned communities or companies. And so for us, it's a matter of finding the right matches. And some of that is word of mouth. It's certainly difficult when people are looking at offshore assets to figure out. I mean, I probably get 10 outreaches a day on LinkedIn where somebody is from some other country trying to offer software development services and that kind of thing. And, the whole vetting process becomes very different. And I think that that's going to be an area of specialty for companies that really want to grow internationally to make sure, how do you vet those global folks? And if you're going to have suppliers, or you're going to have partners in other countries, how do you find out which ones are legit and which ones are the prince that's wanting to get you to help him spend his inheritance over here? Some of those other scams that run around. And I do think that that's going to be a specialty.
So how to find the contract? What kind of contract? Because, for example, there's each country, they have their own legal systems, they have their own taxations. So how you deal with that one? Because as you said, you can find the talent anywhere as well, right? So how you solve this problem? Because what we can see sometimes, yes, we really love to hire someone overseas, but the problem is going to be that how we are going to pay them. How do you want to have a contract with them based on which law we're going to do that one?
Well, I'll give you a really good example. And this is one that shouldn't be difficult at all, right? I did some work with a company over in the UK. And because my company is relatively new, my bank account hadn't been open long enough for me to wire them money. In the UK now, we're not talking about a third world crazy country because banking laws are really, really different. And I think this might be one of those areas where cryptocurrency starts peeking in to get around some of those laws that are very restrictive and very difficult to deal with. But I also think from a contract perspective, contracts, all they really do is keep honest people honest and make rich people out of lawyers. And you need lawyers for those kind of things. And I think if you're going to do business internationally, it is well worth every penny to hire somebody that does contract law internationally to figure out exactly how that works, even if you have to hire an attorney in that country and one in your country, because international litigation could be a very, very tricky subject.
Yeah. So in this stage, because now we're talking about we're actually going to a real global market. We're actually going and creating global jobs. But the challenge then comes, Carrie, is that, you're based in the United States, we're based in Canada, and Canada has to make sure that it keeps unemployment down, and the United States has to make sure they keep unemployment down. Are they going to support this? Because now they're going and we're actually hiring people outside our nations, and we're not really supporting inside our nations. So is there a strategy around this element so we can keep that in balance?
Well, see, that's been happening for a long time. Even if it's been on the product development side, on the manufacturing side, companies have been looking to cut costs for a long time. The trick is, what do you want to support as a company? And I don't think any company is going to be that successful if they completely trash the country of origin that they live in. I mean, there's at some point that as a company, you have to be a responsible steward for the country that you're in. And, there's big companies that, it's kind of a big topic over here in the U.S. because they form subsidiary companies or wholly owned subsidiary companies in other countries. And they do that for the purpose of not repatriating money and paying taxes on the money. And they're, in some cases paying taxes in the other country, which is a big benefit to them. And it's a way to like I said, to cut costs. But at some point, they have to have entities in their original country to make that work. And I think the other byproduct of that is that other countries are going to start increasing their rates of pay because they have to support their employees and support what they're doing. And so if you take a country that is second world or third world or, kind of behind the times for what, we see as normal things and normal benefits, as those people get exposed to companies in other countries and exposed to the benefit packages in other countries and exposed to what other people have, then it becomes, well, FOMO, where's mine?
Yeah.
I need these things too. And so I think some of that is going to grow organically, and some of that just being a good person, a good corporate entity, is going to come organically. And I think some of that is going to be driven in large part by employees, because just having a job and having a quality job are two different things. And people need, companies need to be able to retain their employees. It's very expensive when you have turnover.
Well, and it leads to the next question. I think the element that we think of, because, when there's and I'm kind of leading down this path because I think there's a synergy between these two things, is that, you have this opportunity to source someone like you said in another country, which is cheaper for the organization. And does that now become a roadblock for the individuals that live in the country? Because now I got to compete against, not only do I have to compete globally, now I have to compete against someone who's going to accept this role and do it for a cheaper amount of money. And yet I live in Silicon Valley or I live in Vancouver, and the cost of living is atrocious.
Right? Yeah. Well, that's one of the things that's really been floating around here, especially with Silicon Valley. There's a mass exodus out of Silicon Valley right now because the cost of living is not sustainable. And for companies, they're like, absolutely, go work from anywhere. We're going to cut your pay, so that it's more in line with the region in which you live. But, what happens then as all the people move out, housing prices come down and all of those other things come. So it's very much a supply and demand thing. So, there's always going to be that little bit of tug of war, I think. But, the more forward-thinking companies sort of embrace that and realize that you have to have people at various different levels. I mean, if you're going to be a U.S. company and only do business with resources that are outside of the company, what's the point of being a U.S. company, right? Go be a company over there and then do business in the U.S. And so, you really have to weigh the balance and do what you need to do the right thing and pay people a decent wage. There's a huge inequity between what women make and what men make all over the globe. And I think that needs to stop too. I think if there's a certain position, that position needs to be advertised at a certain rate of pay. and that certain rate of pay needs to be honored no matter who it is. And I think benefits need to be equal. So, there's maternity leave and paternity leave so that we're not discriminating against young women because we're worried that they're going to get pregnant and take off for 6 weeks, right? So, let the men take off for 6 weeks too. That just levels that whole conversation. And so I think that as companies try to attract talent, these things become important. But as they try to retain talent, they become really mandatory.
That is really beautiful thing you said about, especially about the technology people and tech talented, and they can work anywhere. I mean, they nomad workings. They can go for Honduras or some beautiful places, Maldives, and work from there. And
provided there's good internet. Now there are some stipulations, right? And if you get sand in your keyboard, I don't know that it works as well, but
means they found, especially during COVID, they found out they don't need to stay in the big cities and pays a lot of cost, right? And they will leave, they will go to other places and work from there. The question is about, as a manager, it's ours. How can I make sure the delivery that I request is delivered? How can I make sure the performance is there? How can I be sure the money that I'm paying is actually worth that work?
Yeah. So to me, the best way that you can do that is take any project and put it in very small, digestible chunks. So your exposure is not throughout the entire project, that there are written into the contract performance, responsibilities, and guarantees at certain levels. But, you want to limit your exposure. So if you're going to do business with somebody that's very, very new, and say you're anticipating that this is going to be a 600-hour project, well, there should be a check-in at 25 hours. And if at 25 hours there's a red flag, then maybe you put them on probation for the next 25 hours. And then at that point, if it doesn't work, you're out 50 hours. You're not out 600 hours and the cost for 600 hours. And I think really society as a whole today anyway, look at students. They learn in rubrics, right? They're in very small little blocks of, this is what's expected. Here's my goals. This is how I accomplish it. Now, where's my promotion? Where do I go from here? Right. And so I think you have to do that. And it's just part of responsible business to make sure that you limit your exposure while expanding your possibilities.
So and first thing, I want to broadcast this from the Caribbean, guys. I just want to take this on notes. Let's do it from the Caribbean next time.
Hey, I'm in. I'll do that in person.
I love the sunshine and I need some soon. So yeah, like Carrie, one of the things that going down this pathway, it kind of opened my mind to one of the things that I've been sort of kind of trying to wrap my hand around is that the change in the economy and the change in the way people do work and the change when we talk about the gig economy and project-based work versus them being employed by the employer, but maybe running at different projects in an agile format as they move forward into that world. Does that open that door?
Oh, absolutely. And like I said, I think whether you're running a project with your own employees or somebody else, it's a lot easier to fix a problem when you catch it early than it is when that problem has been compounded 52 different times. And so I think just that whole mentality of let's do this in bite-sized pieces. And plus that keeps from overwhelming people too, right? How do you eat an elephant? A bite at a time. Well, if you tell somebody you got to eat this elephant, a bite at a time is one thing. But if you say, look, you just have to eat the leg I'm not advocating cruelty to animals at all, but as that old saying goes, start small and start working within those small confines. And then a lot of times, in those little pieces, you find other things that are very important that you might want to incorporate. So I think that's really huge. And like I said, your exposure is very limited. It gives foreign countries or foreign employees or potential employees or contractors, however you look at it, the opportunity to showcase what they can do in small fixed increments.
So it's one thing it's that, I understand about the contract, but how about the other benefits, such as a pension plan, such about the insurance, extended insurance? So how, if it as a contractor, you don't even need to think about maternity, paternity leave, but the people think about their security.
Sure. And like I said, I think that's one of those things that is going to get better around the globe because people are exposed to more of that. Look at a lot of those countries, people, I will tell you this, having traveled as much as I've traveled, and I've got like 4 million miles going all over the planet. So I can say this with pretty decent authority. But going around the globe, people want the same things. We want a safe place to raise our kids. We want to provide a decent income and decent living for our kids. But the other thing that is completely true everywhere you go around the globe is people assume that other countries are what they see on 24-hour news agencies, which is horrible because they're not. Nobody is. I mean, there's a few idiots, but you have to keep in mind news, they're all about the sensationalism and they have to have their talking points. And then, that feeds another news station. And so you land in a country and you think people are a certain way because that's what you've been exposed to. And you realize, nope, they put their pants on one leg at a time. They still want to, they want a good place for their family. But as we start exposing people to the possibilities and different benefit options and different things, because people talk, right? Once you start working with somebody in another country, you talk and you learn about the other people and you learn about their culture and their way of life and their, and it broadens your horizons, but it also broadens their horizons when they learn what you have. And then they take that back to their employers and say, hey, look, in this country, they have these things. And pretty soon it starts melding together and people get ideas from other people and they expect a different way of life because of what they're doing. And if not, they get up and move.
Exactly. So one more thing about the compensation piece that if you hire people from talent people, how you pay from United States payment scale or from the host country that they are.
Yeah, so that really depends on the banking system, and that's going to be totally different. That's why I think a lot of companies have wholly owned subsidiaries in other countries because it's easier to pay those employees in country with in-country currency than it is. And it gets to be really tricky. So, for instance, a company that I used to work for had a lot of global companies, and depending on the exchange rate, people's money was very, very different, right? If the exchange rate was favorable, they were making bank. If the exchange rate went the other way, they took a huge cut in pay. And so, all of that is something that I think international companies really need to have a strategy and figure out what to do because, if you start messing with people's money, they leave, right? That's not a thing you don't mess with people's family. You don't mess with their money.
Of course.
So, you have to really have somebody that's good at international law, international banking and stuff to help you figure that out.
But I think this leads way to the next evolution of and I think you mentioned it earlier on, Carrie, is that this leads way to the digital, currency. And maybe there's a favorable currency that can go across multiple areas in order to make sure that compensation for doing something is similar and creates that same balance that we're talking about.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see where everything lands in about 5 years, just because, there's a huge talent shortage in tech anyway. And they expect within 5 years, a third of this entire workforce is going to gray out and retire. And so I hope to be one of those somewhere in the Caribbean or somewhere sunny, like you said. But,
take me with yourself. Take me.
Yeah. But although, you guys are not in a bad part of the world either in the summer. I don't want your winter. But the point is, for these companies to start filling some of these positions, I think they're going to make some of these benefits and things available that are relatively equal in other countries. And that's going to make other, companies in those other countries really have to step up to the plate or they're going to start losing employees.
Mm-hmm. Carrie, a lot of these things are just, they're mind-boggling, and I think we could go on for hours and hours and continue going down this pathway. But one of the things that as we start to wrap up our show for this episode, I wanted to really give you an opportunity to, share something with us that we haven't asked, or is there something out there that you think our audience, our students need to know about now or in the future?
So I would say that if you try a job first and you don't like it, don't leave the industry. Look around you, especially in tech. There's a million things you can do, from coding to marketing to sales to, there's just a million things out there. I've got a podcast that is Careers for Women, Trades, and Vets in Tech. And that's all we do is talk about diversity, inclusion, different scholarships that are available, different careers, that people can get into, from construction to the cloud and everything in between. And I think that it also is a really good opportunity, especially for students, to find a mentor, find somebody that will tell you straight, tell you when you're full of it, tell you when you're doing the right thing, help groom your career and figure out where you want to go. Because if you start going through your career and all of your steps, even in school, without a clear idea of where you're going to go, you're going to get lost and founder around a bit. And a lot of times a mentor can be that person that can sort of guide you and challenge you to do your best and make you look in different directions. And it doesn't have to be somebody you know in your network. Matter of fact, it probably should not be. It should be, somebody outside of your network. And don't be afraid to reach out and ask. Like, I have students reach out to me on LinkedIn all the time for advice. I've been in the facility side of tech and I want to get into coding. What are your recommendations? Or I've been in coding and I want to get out of coding. What are your recommendations? How do you do that? And don't be afraid to ask. There's a million people that have been in the industry for a long time that are happy to answer a quick question. And they don't necessarily have to be your mentor, but you can absolutely bounce ideas off of them and figure out just a different perspective, which I think is really important. Just like you think that people should embrace the diversity that you bring to the table, you should very much look for diverse opinions in what you bring to your life.
Exactly. So thank you very much, Carrie, for being here in the Innovation Fuel podcast. And please tell us, our students, how they can reach you out.
So you can get to me on LinkedIn at Carrie Goetz, and that's Goetz, or my company website is www.StrategITcom.com, and that's StrategITcom.com.
Thank you very much.
Carrie, can we also, is there an opportunity for them to hear your podcast? So please, let us know where they can reach you.
You can get to it off of that website. It's StrategITcom.com/podcast. It's also on all the major platforms. And so careers for women, trades, and vets in data centers and tech.
Perfect. I will definitely listen to that one.
Love it, Carrie. Thank you very much for your time today. Loved all the information. To all entrepreneurs and managers out there, we have ambitious students here at UCW who would love to hear from you and help you with your business through our internship, our capstone program. If you think you have a wonderful story or a challenge that you want to share with our students and our audience that you think they can benefit from, we want to hear from you. We want that information. We want you to be a part of this show. We also want you to join our mentorship program. We've got a great mentorship program to help students as they move on their educational journey towards getting into a career or launching a new opportunity. So reach out to us, connect with us at www.ucanwest.ca/Innovation Fuel.
You have just listened to the Innovation Fuel podcast with your hosts, Dave and Gelareh. Subscribe to our podcast on Apple, Google, or Spotify. Join us next week for another innovative story. Thank you for listening and have a great week.